Welcome back, everyone. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today. Joe Hinrichs is Executive Vice President and President of the Americas for Ford Motor Company. Joe has been with Ford since 2000, holding a variety of leadership positions not only in the Americas, but also in the Asia Pacific and Africa regions. Joe's most recent awards include being named the 2013 Fortune Magazine Reader's Choice Business Person of the Year for the automotive industry. In recognition of his leadership in growing Ford's business in China, he was also one of the 10 inaugural winners of the Shanghai Pudong Business Person of the Year Award in 2013. Joe is currently working to launch 23 new vehicles around the world this year, an ambitious number. One of those featured in the show is the new and improved F-150 pickup. This innovative version features an aluminum alloy body, which has triggered changes in the way trucks are built, repaired, and sold. Ford's Mustang sports car is also part of this revamp process and will be sold globally for the first time ever. It's gorgeous. In fact, I want to take it home with me when we leave. These alterations in popular Ford models extend not only to Ford's trucks and sports cars, but to their entire quality assurance system. As part of that system, Ford is spending extensive time conducting research on new vehicles designed prior to production. Joe is leading this process, lending all of his global experience to ensure Ford continues to produce top quality products. With U.S. automotive sales projected to increase in the next decade, Joe will certainly have his work cut out for him. We are looking forward to hearing what is in store for Ford and gaining valuable insight through Joe's global vision of the automotive market. Before I turn things over to Joe, please watch a brief video of what Ford means to its customers.
Ford means reliability for me and my family.
Quality vehicles.
Built tough.
For me, Ford is more than a car manufacturer. Ford is part of my life.
Going further to me is pretty much getting me across the country.
Ford can get you further on a tank of gas.
Ford goes the extra mile for you.
To me, Ford means fun.
Ford for me is that kind of innovation, a change of mindset.
It just has quality and something I can rely on.
我觉得福特车它是进口品牌嘛。
Incredible build quality, probably one of the best build qualities in a car that I've ever had.
It is a fantastic car to drive, and I'm going to have it until she gives up on me.
When I was in Afghanistan, I didn't have to worry about my family's safety when they're driving around in their vehicle.
Ford is always there for you.
I learned to drive in a Ford.
Con 16 años, mis amigos y yo veíamos el cine y veíamos Bullet. Entonces, todos queríamos ser Steve McQueen y todos queríamos tener ese coche.
That was awesome. Pulling up at home in our Ford Explorer with our new baby boy in it was something else.
It's a car company I can trust.
Please join me in giving me a warm welcome to Joe Hinrichs.
Well, thank you, Phyllis, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having us here today. It's great to be back in Chicago. Some of you may know, but I actually lived here in 2000 in Hinsdale, worked down at 123 North Wacker Drive, downtown Chicago, and had a great time with the Ryan family here in Chicago. But I did go back to the auto industry, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. I was born and raised in the Midwest. I actually grew up in Ohio. I've lived in Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Illinois, Massachusetts, Virginia, Canada, China, been around the world, but Chicago is one of my favorite towns, so it's always great to be here. And my daughter is a freshman at Northwestern, so it's always great to be here as well. A lot of Northwestern people here. Of course, Ford Motor Company has also always felt very much at home in Chicago. Henry Ford built the Torrance Avenue assembly plant on the south side of Chicago back in 1924. It's now our oldest continually operating plant in the world. That means that generations of Chicago families have been working here, building some of the finest cars ever made. 10 years ago, we spent over $400 million to modernize the plant And today it employs more than 3,000 people who are building cars that are central to our brand, the Ford Explorer, which is over there, the Ford Taurus, the Lincoln MKS, and our police interceptor vehicles. Now, just half a mile away from the plant is the Chicago manufacturing campus, where 9 of Ford's Tier 1 suppliers are located. Our Chicago plant and campus has become a model for just-in-time manufacturing techniques in the United States. The Ford stamping plant, also here in Cook County, produces body panels for products like Taurus, Explorer, Flex, and Lincoln MKX, and more vehicles soon to be added. So altogether, Ford employs nearly 5,000 people in Illinois and purchases well over $1 billion of parts from suppliers based here annually. Now, I'd also like to recognize our outstanding dealer network in the Chicagoland area. Not only have they grown our business by over 11% just in the past year alone, but they're also key members of the community, providing major support to the Chicagoland chapter of the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, making Ford its largest contributor. They also are active in several of Ford's Go Further community initiatives, including a number of Race for Cure events, our Ford Soccer Skills Challenge, our Drive for Your Community, and Drive for Your Schools program. So our dealers do a great job of being involved in the community. I also like to think our close relationship with the city can be summed up in the example of Gail Weiss, a Chicago school teacher who was the very first customer to buy a Ford Mustang in 1964. It pleases me to know that she still has the car, but we have it on the stand, and it keeps it in perfect condition at her home in Park Ridge, and you can see the car on our stand. And Gail was with us when we revealed the new Mustang, this one right here, on December 5th. So Illinois has always played an important part of the Ford story. And that story is looking as bright as this all-new Ford Mustang down here right in front of me. 2014 will see more vehicle launches and more new investments than at any time since we implemented our One Ford plan. Now, globally, as was mentioned, this year we'll open 3 new manufacturing plants, launch 23 new vehicles, and right here in the United States, we'll be adding more than 5,000 new jobs to meet the growing demand of our products. That's after adding 14,000 jobs in America in the last 2 years. Thank you. Now, we'll be building on what was a terrific year in 2013, where we had record profits here in North America, and we look to keep this momentum going with 16 new products that we'll add to our showrooms this year in the U.S. Now, several of those models are on display here today. For the very first time, actually, we are proud to present the 2015 Lincoln Navigator. You also have the opportunity this afternoon to take a good look at, of course, the new model years of our Explorer built in Chicago, and of course, as I mentioned already, the 50th year of a wonderful icon, the Mustang. Now, some of Ford's current momentum has been made possible by our One Ford vision to capitalize on technical and business synergies whenever possible across all of our markets worldwide. That means we work hard to simplify and unify our product lineup and branding wherever we can. This approach has delivered remarkable results, generating growth in all of our regions. More than 6.3 million vehicles sold in 2013, and that's a 12% increase over the prior year against a nearly 5% growth rate for the industry as a whole. 5 years ago, when the global crisis was at its worst, this sort of growth was difficult to imagine. But the Ford team weathered the storm without any outside help. And since then, we've been moving forward as a sustainable, profitable growth company that is sized to compete effectively around the world. Today, the company is offering its broadest lineup ever, selling global products driven by a deep sense of what a Ford is. Growth is being driven by cars like the Ford Focus, which is the top-selling nameplate in the world, including China, by our famous lineup of sport utility vehicles, by small cars like Fiesta and Ka, and by our profitable commercial vehicle business, including Transit, Transit Connect, Ranger, and F-150. Now, back in 1924, to some people, it might have seemed like a revolutionary idea to assemble cars on this side of Lake Michigan. But even that early, Ford was already becoming a truly global company, manufacturing automobiles in Argentina and making a strong push into Europe. Plants were opened in Great Britain and France shortly after the end of the First World War. And Ford actually became the first international business in the auto industry as early as 1904, when production started across the border in Canada. Today, more than half of our vehicles are produced outside of North America. And even more importantly, we are well positioned in the world's two largest auto markets, the United States and China. Now, I've had the privilege of leading substantial expansions for Ford in both of these markets, and we will be drawing on some of that experience in my comments today. The global business landscape now is very different from what it looked like back when Ford's international operations first took shape. Today's auto industry is much bigger, more complicated, and much more competitive. In response, government regulators and global firms have had to expand their efforts to foster a healthy marketplace and to encourage production in their local markets. Trade agreements have played an important part in the continuing transformation of the global marketplace. The right environment for trade depends on the negotiation and enforcement of high-standard 21st century trade agreements. But in any given domestic market, a successful manufacturing sector also requires good infrastructure, strong educational institutions, the latest technology, and a capacity for innovation. The United States has traditionally been very strong in all of these areas. And we have been developing some additional competitive advantages recently here in the U.S., which are improving the position of us as a manufacturing base. For many years, the U.S. was thought of as a high-cost domestic producer, while China was seen as the low-cost exporter. That relationship is now in transition. For one thing, China's strong local demand is driving exports to China, like this Chicago-built Explorer you see here today. Last year, we sold more than 30,000 Ford Explorers and Ford Edge SUVs produced here in North America to customers in China. Now, who would have thought a few years ago that U.S. manufacturers would actually be shipping autos and supplying China? Right now, everything we produce in China is actually sold in that market. And the conventional wisdom that China has the upper hand in manufacturing is now being challenged. The cost of production in China has been increasing, along with the input costs for energy and commodities, while the cost of labor has been rising as the market grows and the Chinese economy becomes even stronger. To be clear, given the massive growth yet to come, investing in China will continue to be well worth all the higher costs. Now, meanwhile, here in the United States, the massive restructuring of the auto industry in the last few years, including capacity reductions and improvements in the overall cost structure, have put the U.S. auto industry in a much stronger position globally. At the same time, the boom in domestic energy production has reduced prices, access to commodities has improved, and the labor market has become more competitive. All that has brought us to the point where we can compete effectively around the globe and export our products. At Ford, our exports from the U.S. have increased by 50% since the lows of 2009. I'm pleased to be able to say that Ford is now the largest exporter of automobiles from the United States. But the future is clearly going to present the whole industry with many new challenges. Now, one of the big questions that manufacturers are trying to answer right now is whether growth can be sustained both in the U.S. and China as these two markets begin to look more alike. What do we need to change if the U.S. and China are going to avoid repeating the sins of previous growth cycles, when overcapacity and the loss of competitiveness doom the automobile industry to up and down cycles? In other words, how do we build a model that is fair and sustainable? I think it comes down to three things. First, we have to keep investing in the intellectual and human capital that drives our ability to innovate and compete. Second, sustainable growth, by definition, has to respect our environment and consider the impact of our products on people and communities. And third, we have to put in place high standard trade agreements and truly open access to all markets. Of course, we could discuss any one of these points for hours, but for the remainder of my time today, I'd like to focus on trade agreements and market access. Now, the model for several of the trade agreements that are now under discussion worldwide is, of course, NAFTA. It provided new economic opportunities for workers and companies on both sides of the border. Ultimately, NAFTA expanded the market and provided opportunities for manufacturers to optimize their operations across North America. We hope that some of the promising negotiations taking place right now will generate comparable or even greater benefits for everyone involved. One proposal with real potential is TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. A strong agreement of the sort being discussed could harmonize safety, efficiency, and environmental standards between the United States and Europe. Now, these two markets have always shared similar objectives when it comes to safety and the environment. Even if we have often taken different paths to achieve them, developing one set of rules could be applied to both markets, and that would represent a significant step forward for the automotive sector. The current proposal would also eliminate all tariffs on cars and light trucks between the two markets. Now, opening up the auto market like this would clear the way for tremendous new synergies and increased efficiency in the auto sector, largely eliminating the need to produce similar but different vehicles that have to meet very different technical standards for two major markets. Right now, our most successful example of cross-border manufacturing and marketing, the Ford Fusion, shares at most roughly 80% of the parts from one market to the next. Now, if negotiations are handled effectively under TTIP, it should be possible to improve on that number substantially for all auto manufacturers. The impact of this sort of an agreement cannot be overstated. It has been estimated that an ambitious agreement between the U.S. and EU could contribute 0.4 and 0.5% respectively in GDP growth to these two vital economies. Another potentially huge opportunity can be seen in the Transatlantic Pacific Partnership, or what's called TPP, a trade negotiation now involving 12 countries, including the U.S., Japan, Canada, Mexico, Australia, Peru, and Malaysia. The membership would account for 40% of the global GDP. Like TTIP, the TPP has tremendous potential. But it has to be the right agreement, a high-quality agreement of the sort that was originally envisioned. Unfortunately, the large number of trading partners involved also means that more potential roadblocks come up in the negotiations. So there's a very real risk of ending up with an agreement that won't be useful to anyone. For one thing, the TPP is not likely to generate any net benefits for American manufacturers if it does not address the critical issue of currency manipulation. In fact, according to the Center for Automotive Research, any agreement that fails to address currency manipulation will cost tens of thousands of American jobs. These are all kinds of pitfalls associated with negotiating any trade agreement. But the real elephant in the room now is currency manipulation. And we need to make sure that it is not ignored. We believe it represents the major trade barrier of the 21st century, and it must be addressed in any future U.S. trade agreements. Now, countries like Japan have historically manipulated their currencies in order to gain unfair advantages in the global marketplace and protect their home markets. For example, Japan has for many years managed to maintain a one-way relationship in automotive trade. Despite zero tariffs, 94% of all vehicles sold in Japan are made in Japan by Japanese companies. Now, partly this is the result of non-tariff barriers, cultural barriers, but recent announcements by the Japanese government that have driven down the value of the yen represent a major new hurdle. Morgan Stanley has estimated the recent fall in the yen puts roughly $2,000 per export vehicle in the pockets of Japan's three biggest automakers. Of course, every country has a right to conduct sound monetary policy. That includes legitimate strategies like quantitative easing. But direct currency intervention cannot be tolerated in the 21st century. Ford has supported every free trade agreement the United States has ever negotiated. Free trade is at the heart of our business model, whether imports or exports are under discussion. Last year, Ford exported more than 370,000 American-made automobiles around the world, supporting high-quality jobs and investment right here at home. The American auto industry is now the United States' #1 export sector. Nonetheless, Ford will urge Congress to oppose a TPP agreement if it does not include strong and enforceable currency disciplines. The solution we are supporting is designed to enforce existing commitments on currencies that have already been made through the IMF and the WTO. Every TPP country has already agreed to these principles. We simply want to see real enforcement mechanisms be put in place. The TPP is likely to serve as a model for future agreements with other Asian markets. So we have to get the template right, because we all know that automotive exports from Asia and other emerging markets are going to be a part of our future. In China alone, manufacturers are expected to produce more than 30 million cars by 2018. Eventually, some of those cars are going to be exported to the United States. Ultimately, neither the U.S. nor its great manufacturing companies can compete successfully overseas without careful planning, without taking a serious and aggressive approach to protecting the basic principles of free trade and open markets. Doing this will involve working closely with governments toward the goal of creating a level playing field for firms like Ford and others. Moving forward, the U.S. still needs to develop a coherent manufacturing policy. Coordinated initiatives that create a strong business environment are more essential than ever to support America's manufacturing resurgence. As we've discussed, this manufacturing policy would include strong trade agreements that open new markets for American products. It would also include tax reforms to reduce rates and simplify the tax code. The U.S. corporate tax burden is among the highest in the world, which limits our competitiveness. A lower tax rate would help Ford and others invest in jobs here at home, accelerate new technologies, and deliver best-in-class vehicles. A clear policy would also provide regulatory certainty. Investment in the U.S. automotive sector will continue to depend on a stable and predictable regulatory environment for safety, fuel economy, and greenhouse gas emissions. These regulations must balance our shared policy goals, economic realities, and consumer acceptance. Lastly, we need an energy policy that will provide secure, reliable, and diverse sources of energy. Ford supports an integrated energy policy that addresses the need for supporting infrastructure, the development of new vehicle technologies, and the production of traditional and alternative fuels. In addition to these basic elements of a sound manufacturing policy, we need to promote strategic investment in public-private partnerships so that American firms will be able to rely on the best infrastructure, transportation networks, and other key resources. Continuing investment in STEM education represents another important component of America's plans for the future. The United States is home to many of the world's top college and graduate programs in fields related to science, technology, engineering, and math. But we need to steer more of the brightest American students into those programs. And we need to ensure that all high school graduates are equipped with the basics they need to perform well in today's global market. So there is a great deal of work to be done. And the rundown I just went through is limited only to needs that we need to accomplish right here in America. Today, more than ever, Ford is a global company with operations and sales channels throughout the world. We take our One Ford vision very seriously. And we believe that genuine free trade and competition are good for all the participants in such a system, right here in Chicago and in places as Brussels and Beijing and Sao Paulo. We also believe that stronger currency rules have to stand front and center in any future trade agreements. A strong and consistent framework for global trade is within reach. And we firmly believe that Ford and the United States are uniquely equipped to perform at their very best in such a framework. Thanks so much for having me here today. It's one of my favorite places to be. And now we get a chance to answer all your questions. I know you've been submitting them. Thank you.
All right. That's terrific, Joe. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. You know, many say that the rebuilding of Ford over this time period was truly remarkable, that you were the only U.S. company to avoid bankruptcy and turned in consistent, profitable performance. Can you give us a little insight into the changes that were made that led to such outstanding performance?
Well, it's a long story, but I mean, when Alan Mulally came in as CEO in September of 2006, a couple of things became very apparent. One, Alan believed very clearly that we needed to focus on the Ford and Lincoln brands, and so we sold off, you know, Aston Martin, Land Rover, Volvo, Jaguar, and we de-invested in Mazda, so we could focus on Ford and Lincoln. But I would say actually the turnaround of Ford is as much a leadership story as a business story. And the unification of our leadership team, the expectations of the behaviors of the leadership team, and Alan's leadership, positive optimism and energy played a big role in the turnaround. One of the advantages we had, of course, is we started restructuring a little sooner and more aggressively than some of our competitors, and we also, as part of that restructuring before 2008, which changed everything, we borrowed a lot of money so that we could pay for all the plant closings and all the restructuring we needed to do. And that foresight ended up allowing us to help some liquidity that we needed to get through 2008, 2009. But when you get into 2009, when things are really bad, 5 years ago this month actually, that's when all of our stakeholders and shareholders came together. And we did a new contract with the UAW. We issued a voluntary offer for our bondholders to pay down debt. We ended up buying $10 billion of debt for about $3 billion at the time, but it was voluntary. We raised new capital by going to the stock market in the spring of 2009 and raised $1.6 billion of cash. And then and our dealers and our suppliers and our board took no salary and our CEO took a pay cut, and all these things happened. Everybody chimed in. We had a plan, and then 5 years later, North America has record profits, our dealers had record profits last year, and our employees are getting record profit sharing checks. So that's the great combination of how it all came together.
No, it's terrific. In fact, you mentioned that the average employee is getting, what, about $8,000?
Yeah, our UAW employees are getting $8,800 on average. And
it's pretty amazing.
We'll see what the salary folks get.
So you now, probably be a little bit more. But now you're experiencing record growth in a global industry that is forecast to grow more slowly in the next few years. And did I hear that you guys have raised your growth projections to 25%? And so that's huge, right? Really aggressive. How do what do you see as the biggest challenge of achieving that goal?
Well, I mean, it's almost, I'd say, the auto industry right now is as competitive as it's ever been. Almost everybody's back to full strength, if you want to call it that. The yen has been depreciated, so the Japanese are very strong. GM and Chrysler brought out a lot of new products and obviously shed the government ownership piece. And just globally, there's a lot of competition. We feel very strongly that the benefits that we've had in our One Ford plan globally of, commonizing our platforms, bringing out great new products, keeping the highest refresh rate in the industry so we have fresh product to talk about all the time, lends itself well to growth. We grew 50% last year in China. We had the largest market share gain last year in the United States of any manufacturer. So we're starting to see the benefits of all that investment in product and all the globalization of our business. But it's a very competitive environment. We have said we did over 6 million units last year. We expect to do over 8 million units by mid-decade, so that's coming up pretty soon. But we do have growth ahead of us, and a lot of that's happening in the emerging markets like Asia Pacific and Russia, and the Russian market's down a little bit lately, but South America, Middle East and Africa, these places where we need to grow even further.
And you're feeling fully confident, although January was a tough month.
January, go outside.
Yeah.
In the Midwest and the East, and even in the Southeast at the end of the month, snow has had a big impact, and the weather, cold, has had a big impact on the January sales. and most of the industry was down, although a couple of our competitors were up. We'll see that, January is usually the lowest month of the year, but we feel pretty good about the year, but it's off to a cold start. That's for sure.
It really is. Yes, welcome to Chicago.
We live in
Detroit, so yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your vehicles. I mean, probably the biggest bet you've made is the F-150, right? This aluminum truck. This really contrasts in decisions made by your competitors. And, what were some of the factors that you all considered in terms of cost, weight, fuel economy, et cetera, to really, change like the largest selling vehicle in America?
Yeah, this is a big deal, and you can imagine there were a lot of people involved, including our board. We went to the board several years ago with a plan. Given where we expect fuel prices to go over time, and given where the fuel economy requirements are from the U.S. with the government, and given where things generally are going when it comes to the fuel economy in general, we wanted to change the game when it comes to trucks. We've been the leader in truck sales for 37 straight years in the United States, and the F-150 or F-Series been the largest selling vehicle in the United States for 32 straight years. So it's a big deal to mess around with that formula. But we made a commitment, every new vehicle we do, to try and be class leading in fuel economy. And when we did a new platform, to take weight out. So the new F-150 will have up to around 700 pounds of weight out with aluminum alloy body. It's actually the same aluminum alloys used in military grade applications like in the Humvee. But we've strengthened the actual frame, so the actual vehicle is stronger. But you can imagine, we haven't said anything about fuel economy yet, but you can imagine if each of us took about 40% of our body weight out and then put more muscle in, we'd probably be a little more capable of doing things. And we'd probably be more efficient than we did. So we're really excited about it. It does change the game in trucks because it allows us to put a 2.7 liter V6 EcoBoost engine in the new truck and still be able to haul and tow, because you can downsize the engine because you're not carrying as much weight and you can do more. Or it allows us, if that vehicle has 700 pounds less weight, you can tow 700 pounds more, or you can haul 700 pounds more, etc. So we're really excited about what it does. And interestingly, and this hasn't been picked up a lot, CAFE requirements started in the early 70s after the oil embargo and everything. They've been with us for a long time in the U.S. and there's lots of opinions on CAFE, but when you look at trucks, they've historically not been a positive contributor to CAFE for any of us. When we launched the new F-150 at the end of the year, for the first time in its history, the best-selling vehicle in the United States will be a positive contributor to our MAFE requirements for the fuel economy standard of the government. So it actually changes the game. Our largest selling vehicle becomes positive as opposed to being negative since the early 70s. So it's a big deal.
Yeah. What about your confidence of having a service network in place to repair these vehicles and consumer concerns about the costs related to service?
Yeah, we get a lot of questions on this, and it's a very important topic. Our dealers are getting ready. We have a whole plan to get everybody ready up capacity, because aluminum's in vehicles today. That Mustang right there has aluminum hood and aluminum fenders. Aluminum is in vehicles, but not
the whole vehicle.
And not like some of the high volume F-150. But so we just need to have the capacity and the skills and training to be able to use aluminum. In some cases, because it's aluminum, it's a more modular design, so some of the repairs are actually easier and faster because of the aluminum can just be replaced modularly. But in some other cases, there's a lot more craftsmanship involved. So we have a whole training plan. We'll have all the body shops across the U.S. and our own Ford dealer stores ready to go by the end of October, so we can be ready for this. But you can imagine we've taken a lot of time to think this through because we know how important it is.
It's a big deal. Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing to reestablish the Lincoln brand so you can really compete in the luxury market.
Yeah, this is a very important initiative for us. Lincoln's been with us since Ford purchased it in 1922. And only about 14, 15 years ago, it was like the second largest luxury make in the world. And with all the other brands we bought in the 90s and early 2000s and all the other things going on, Lincoln got a little bit left out. And all of our major competitors like Volkswagen, Toyota, General Motors have strong luxury brands or investing in strong luxury brands. And so we're really making a strong commitment to Lincoln. We're freshening the Navigator today. The inside's great, and we're showing that. We have the new Lincoln MKC coming out in a few months, which is in the premium segment. The small utility is the fastest growing segment, so we're coming into that at the right time with a great product. And we're going to have a lot more product to talk about over the years. And our dealers are investing with us. More than half of our dealers are building new facilities. We're going to take the service to another level. This is but it's going to take it's a multi-year journey we're on. It doesn't happen overnight, but we're committed to it and we're looking forward to it.
So let's talk a little bit about the future. Global R&D expenditures are at an all-time high for the auto industry. So what are some of the areas that the industry is focusing on, and how will that influence the cars we drive in the next 10 years?
Well, there are several. The first one, probably the most prominent one, is fuel economy enhancements. Downsizing of engines, turbocharging of engines, weight reductions, like we talked about for F-150, meeting the new and ever-increasing fuel economy requirements of the governments and the expectations of consumers is probably where most of the technology investments going in. That includes electrified vehicles and et cetera. Another big area is the whole area of connectivity and telematics and technology in the car and then outside the car. Consumers today expect to be able to continue their social life and the connectivity to the world in their vehicle. And so whether it's use of the cell phone connected, the smartphone connected to the vehicle, or modems or other things, to be able to stay connected socially and safely is a big issue. There's another big initiative going on. And the one getting all the attention lately, that's a longer term project, I think, for the industry, but getting a lot of attention is this connectivity to other vehicles and to the rest of the world. We were talking at lunch, and I told Phyllis, I can see a day where, in our lifetime, where you're driving on the Eisenhower or Stevenson or something, Ryan, wherever, and you need a parking spot in downtown Chicago, and your car communicates to the parking garages, finds the nearest where you need to be parking garage, reserves a spot, and navigation takes you there.
Amazing.
Because 30%, we've done a study, 30% of gas usage in the city is trying to find a parking spot. You guys live in Chicago, you guys know. But think about that. The whole world can get more efficient by using technology. And that means you got to connect, you got to have, the parking spaces need to have connectivity, and the parking garages need it, and the cars need it, but it's going to happen. And there's a lot of things we can do to make the environment driving some more safe, and also make it more efficient. We need both of that, and especially in big cities where congestion is a big issue.
Yeah, and you're doing this work with MIT and Stanford to automate this driving experience. I mean, are we headed to the driverless car? I mean, are we going to get there?
Well, we believe that the driver, the pilot, should always be in control and to be able to access and take over control. Never take out the human element, just like in flying. But at the same time, we're ever increasing the technologies and the capability to get there. I mean, many of you have cars, I'm sure, I do, that have adaptive cruise control. So the cruise control goes up to the speed limit you set it. When it sees vehicles in front of you, it notices that, it slows down automatically, and then when it frees up, it takes off. That's not automated steering, but it's automated, acceleration, deceleration. We're going to get more evolution in that technology, and ultimately, you'd like to get to a point from a safety standpoint and efficiency standpoint where the vehicles are connected, talking to each other, and they know what each other's doing. Because one of the reasons why we have all this stop and start traffic, one of the reasons why we have less efficiency in our network is people have to give space because they don't trust what's going to happen in front of them. And then everyone slows down and look at what's happening, and then they go back up. If we're all talking to each other, the whole system can move in sync. And if you know what that person in front of that car in front of you is doing, and the one in front of that, your car can get really close to the next car, and you can all move in sync. We can get more vehicles, we can be more efficient, don't let the car slow down because you want to gawk at something. There's all these things that can happen, and that can make the system more efficient, more fuel efficient, and also provide more ability to handle more cars on the road.
That's amazing. And so it kind of kicks in like an automatic cruise control, but on steroids.
Yeah, but the issue around autonomous driving that has a lot of people concerned is, technology isn't perfect. And where's the liability start and stop? And where does the accountability start and stop? And do you really want the driver to be totally disengaged? Because then don't have the ability to react if something goes wrong, or if something is not happening the way it's supposed to happen. Planes have autopilot. We don't let the pilots sleep in the cockpit. At least I don't think they do. So we need to be able to think that through and be able to take over control. And there's a lot of liability ramifications to all that, as you might imagine. But technology's coming, and we need to get there. But I'm not sure we want to be in a spot where you're reading the paper and you don't see what's going on in front of you.
It'll be interesting to see how the regulations come to kind of.
And there's a lot of that going on, and everyone's working together to kind of help set the standards for how we move forward and test vehicles. Frankly, even testing vehicles on the roads, they're autonomous, is its own interesting development you can appreciate.
Neat. What about the electric vehicle market? Any plans to compete with Tesla?
Well, Tesla's a player that sells to a higher end customer than the Ford brand typically does. We sold more plug-in hybrids in the fourth quarter last year than Tesla sold vehicles. But we don't need the same coverage for that, I know. But, I'm trying to help you guys out. But Tesla, I've driven. We have personally. Our company has one. I've driven it home. I've tested it. We've torn it apart. And it's a good vehicle. The issue that the industry faces is consumer acceptance. Last year, electrified vehicle sales, which includes hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and battery electric vehicles, was a little over 3% of the whole industry. Now, if I'd have sat here 5 years ago, 8 years ago, and we had this conversation, you'd all be predicting that there'd be a lot bigger percentage of the industry would be electrified by now. There's several reasons for that. One is gas prices have not gone up as people expected, and people are making an economic choice. Consumers are. And the other reason is battery technology and advancements in cost and capability of those batteries hasn't accelerated as much as people expected they would. It's definitely a major part of the long-term auto industry, and it's going to grow. But it's not as big as we thought it was going to be at this stage, and that has ramifications for the fuel economy mandates we all have, because if consumers aren't going to buy more electrified vehicles, we collectively have a challenge to meet the ever-increasing fuel economy requirements set forth by the government.
So you don't see an all-electric market anytime in the next 25, 30 years?
It's hard to predict 25 years. We didn't have internet 25 years ago. But in the next 5 years, it's not going to be 20% of the industry. And it's going to keep increasing, but it has to be economical for the consumer to accept. And we're all working hard on it. We have a number of products ourselves. Some of our products do really well, but it's still an evolving part of it, and a smaller part of the industry.
Yeah. So shifting to global markets, because you mentioned something pretty important, which is this whole issue around currency intervention, which has really inflated Toyota's record profits, right? So the Center for Automotive Research said that 90,000 American jobs could be at risk if this is not addressed. Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, I've seen the report from the Center for Automotive Research. I haven't been through the details behind it, but Toyota is a very strong competitor. Let's be very clear, and they're very formidable around the world. But they announced their profits 2 days ago, and it was $5 billion in the quarter, and $2.5 billion of it was due to the exchange change year over year. $2.5 billion is a lot of money. We made $8.6 billion in profit last year as a company globally. So you do 2.5 times 4, that's $10 billion. That's a lot of money. So it's a real issue. And from our perspective, a couple of very important points. Number one, the U.S. auto industry, and some of it at the expense of taxpayers, went through a massive restructuring. We align our capacity to demand, and the businesses are all better for it. All GM, Chrysler, Ford are all delivering far better results. The Japanese auto industry never went through that restructuring. It kept all the excess capacity. The Japanese auto industry has about 11 million units of capacity for a market at home that's about 4.8 million units. So that's 6 million units of capacity that hasn't been taken out that wants to go somewhere. And it's hard to go to China because of the relations. Can't go to Europe because the European industry is down. Where's it going to go? Which industry is the biggest, most open in the world, and it's growing? Any ideas? So, we compete with all these major manufacturers around the world. And we believe that, one, American auto workers shouldn't be sacrificed because American trade cannot be set fairly. And we believe also that markets should be open, like ours. And the two markets that are most obvious in that regard in the auto industry are Japan and Korea. 94% of Japanese markets domestic, and they ship a lot of vehicles this way. And so we believe that it should be an open market, and those issues should be addressed. And then in future trade agreements, if a country directly intervenes in their currency by changing their foreign reserve or exchange reserve accounts, by intervening, then there should be some mechanism to deal with that. That's different than quantitative easing.
Let's talk a little bit about workforce, because you mentioned the importance of STEM. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce predicts that less than half of our workforce will be qualified for 21st century jobs by 2050. 50% of employers are having trouble finding workers who are trained for high school jobs. So when you think about Ford and your ability to have a competitive workforce that you need to continue to innovate, what are you all doing to address this problem?
Yeah, we have a lot of partnerships in the communities where we have manufacturing plants for technical skills especially, because it's a technical trade, especially electrical, where we've been in short supply. And then with our dealerships, we've been developing technician programs with universities and with other organizations to have technicians that are ready. That's also a shortage of technicians to work on cars. Cars, trucks and utilities are very complex nowadays. It takes a lot of technical training to work on these vehicles. So that's a couple of things we're doing. And I have an undergraduate electrical engineering degree, and I feel very passionately that the Asian economies especially are outpacing us as a country when it comes to emphasis on science, technology, and math and engineering. And many are coming over here and getting educated and going back to work to compete against us, which is fine. But we need to really get back to emphasizing what made this nation great in the 19th century and 20th century, which was the ability to innovate, build things, compete worldwide. And so those are some of the things we're doing. We've also continued to be involved with our Ford Fund and many STEM initiatives as well, funding programs for high school kids, and et cetera, especially in the Southeast Michigan area.
Yeah, so you mentioned Alan Mulally earlier in the conversation, and obviously for success, a lot of it has been attributed to his leadership. And there were just a few rumors last month about him potentially leaving to go work for some big software company.
In Seattle.
Yeah, in Seattle. Whatever that
his
could be.
hometown.
But he made a comment that he was going to stay at least through 2014, which is interesting. So any comments on that, and what impact would Alan's departure have on the company?
Well, I've worked for Alan since 2007. He's been a great leader. We're fortunate that we have a very strong leadership team, and we've been together through all of this. Most of us, although I've changed a few jobs, have been around that table together really through it all. And that builds some camaraderie, and it builds a bit of a relationship that you can't trade and get from having been through in the bunker together, so to speak. A lot of the processes that Alan brought, business plan review process, special attention review, business environment focus, are now ingrained in our business day to day. That's not going to change. For the rest of us, we need to make sure we lead in a positive and optimistic way and deal with reality. And deal with the reality that we have, whether it's in Brazil or whether it's in Canada or whether it's in China, and be aggressive in how we deal with that. And that's been part of the success story of Ford, and Alan was a big part of that. And whenever he does decide to retire, he'll have earned that retirement, and then he's been a great person to work with. We're at Ford.
Great. So I have to ask, what was your favorite car growing up, and what are you driving now?
When I was growing up, actually, it was a Jaguar. And then I joined Ford, and we owned Jaguar, and then quickly we sold Jaguar. And my father-in-law actually had a 73 Jaguar V12 convertible XKE that was a great car that he gave to me for a while. And then he sold it when we sold Jaguar. But so that was all, because it's elegant and sexy and unique, and it's where I grew up. I didn't see a Jaguar. We didn't have money that we could buy Jaguars. I drive a Navigator today, day to day, because I got to drive 20 some miles to work, and I have 3 teenagers. Somebody has to drive a big vehicle because we have go to the lake or something, but my wife doesn't want to drive a big vehicle, which I understand. But I do have in my garage for fun a Ford GT, which is a sports car we made a few years ago that still has 600 horsepower and still does some damage. And my daughter, my youngest daughter, is trying to encourage me to bring one of these home.
That's what I'm going to take.
So working on that. But I also have an F-150 for other purposes. So very fortunate. But what I do often is bring a lot of vehicles home, competitive vehicles and in our own different vehicles so I can drive them all. So that's something that's fun to do.
That's great. Well, thank you, Joe. You've been terrific. And Ford is a great company, does our country proud, and we look forward to your continued success.
Thanks, Melissa. Thank all of you. Appreciate it.
We'd also like to thank the Chicago Automobile Trade Association and the Auto Alliance for hosting us. And as a reminder, please take one of your credentials at your table if you plan to visit the show. The showroom floor and coat check will be open until 3:30 p.m. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.